Hello, everyone. My name is Max Yvetot. I am the head of urban governance at Straka KB, which is an international urban consultancy based in Moscow. And today I will moderate our conference on mass housing and climate change, challenges and solutions. This conference follows a 2-day workshop on the same theme, whose results will be presented at the end of today's session. This 3-day event, the workshop and today's public conference, have been jointly organized by Straka KB together with the Isocarb Institute. It takes place in the framework of the World Urban Campaign, a partnership platform advocating for well-planned cities coordinated by the UN Habitat. The theme of the World Urban Campaign this year was climate action solutions. Most importantly, we were able to bring in high-ranking speakers and organize before today's conference a 2-day workshop thanks to the financial support of the delegation of the European Union in Russia. With this Urban Thinkers Campus on mass housing and climate change, all partners mentioned wish to launch an initiative to tackle mass housing in adaptation to climate change by sharing intelligence between motivated students and experienced professionals on the topic. Our intention was to have both a conference and a workshop to benefit from both a top-down and bottom-up approach to this problem. The result of this first step will be presented online at the COP26 on November the 10th. I would like to introduce now the participants of today's discussion. So introductory words will be given by Ekaterina Malieva, who is project director at Straka KB, and also Didier Van Kutsem, director at Isocarb Institute. Those introductory words will be followed by presentations by Christophe Lalande, who is housing lead specialist at the Land, Housing and Shelter section of the UN Habitat. Atsuhito Oshima, who is senior policy analyst at the OECD. Ilmar von Loyevsky, counselor at the German Associations of City and former head of department in the urban planning office of the city of Dresden. Thomas de Bethune, team leader for urban policy at the DG Regional and Urban Policy of the European Commission. Michaela Kauer, director of the Brussels Liaison Office of the City of Vienna and coordinator of the EU Urban Agenda Housing Partnership. Christophe Hutin, architect, curator, and film director. And lastly, Alexandra Chuchetkina, managing director at Straka KB. So I would like to give the first word to Ekaterina Malieva, project director at Straka KB, with whom we developed this program. Ekaterina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for everyone for joining us within this interesting topic. And I will give just a slight introduction to why we have decided to address it within our workshop. Let me share my screen. No?
It's not.
Why addressing housing? Housing makes the greatest share of urban fabric all over the world, and it can take up to 80% of urban fabric, actually. So the quality of daily life, which is the most important thing why cities exist for, is highly dependent on the quality of housing. And the great share of this housing in the world cities at the moment is a post-war mass housing. In Russia, we experience it in a greatest degree, I would say, because almost 74 million square meters of housing and 38 million apartments are built after the Second World War, and it's really a mass-produced industrial housing. So almost 70% of the population in our country live in similar conditions, and this we can see around many other countries. For example, in France, there are almost 6 million apartments of the same, let's say, typology. In the beginning, it was built to change life for better. At least what we can see also in Russian, in the history of our families, I would say. And only in 30 years in Russia, the housing stock tripled from 50s to 80s, and in many other countries it has doubled. So this is the really typology that shapes residential areas in many cities of the world. But having solved this housing crisis, it also made life uniform, because you can see the similar typologies all over the world. For example, from India to Japan and to Poland, you can find absolutely similar landscapes. And we are thinking of how to reshape or adjust this kind of housing to modern conditions, or maybe diversify it to modern life. We understand that we cannot just replace it. This is totally impossible because the amount of this housing is too huge. For example, it's going to take 30% of Russian annual GDP to just replace 1/3 of mass housing units. Or we are going to produce too much construction waste if we would like to demolish it and rebuild. For example, the program launched in Moscow to demolish 5-story high buildings and to replace them with modern housing produces as much waste as all households in the country per year. So it's almost the households of the country with a population of 140 million. And also, when we think of replacement of this kind of housing, we understand that we are going to produce too much CO2 emissions, because construction industry, together with production of concrete, also is very polluted. And we also understand that this housing can stay with us for longer than we expected, because in the beginning, when it was designed, it was planned for, let's say, 100-year life cycle, and it hasn't expired yet. But if you renovate this, you can extend it for 40 years more. So it's not a case when we can imagine our cities become totally different in the next 100 years. So can this housing adapt and change to changing lifestyles and changing climate conditions? This was the question that we asked for ourselves. Can it adjust to the local cultural context, to local climate context, and the future climate development, let's say, or adjust to modern trends in lifestyles? That is why we have launched this workshop, which covers 4 different climate zones and considers different trends in climate change for those areas, and also considers similar typologies evolving according to the local context. We are happy that we have received applications and gathered participants from 10 countries, of course, from Russia, but what is also interesting, from Argentina, USA, Iran, India, and Indonesia, which is a worldwide coverage. And we are really happy to launch this event together with our partners. So I hope that this event is going to be a starting point to the broader discussion on the issue, which I think is quite important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yekaterina, for this introduction. I would just like to add the fact that we had even more than 10 countries in the workshop. I will now give the floor to Didier van Kutsen, director of the embark Institute, for additional introductory words before we pass on to the presentations. Didier?
Thank you very much, Max. Thank you for this invitation. And please, if you can activate my presentation, it would be nice. Yes, on behalf of the ISOCARP Institute, I would like to congratulate you already for this very great initiative. And I think if we see different paths, different futures, but an ideal time to share intelligence on mass housing, this is because time is now. Time is really now, and it's really, really urgent. If we can see the next slide. It's urgent because we are facing climate challenges. We are facing to change our existing housing stock into more energy efficient. We need to make it more comfortable, and we need to make it carbon neutral within the next 10 or 15 years. Otherwise, we may have problems, and we may face very big problems in the near future, not only for us, but also for the next generations. The next slide. So it is crucial. And if you look at all these figures, it's really a complex issue. It's not only building, it's also a lot of different emissions produced by the building sector, right? So if you look at the figures again here, this is the latest one from 2020, you can see that the building sector is responsible for 35% of energy consumption and also 38% of emissions and greenhouse gases, what Ekaterina was mentioning before. And this is the situation now, but we know very well that it is growing and still continuing to grow, and we expect it to grow in the next 15, 20 years. If we see the next slide, we know that we are facing population growth, and we are facing a big challenge with the urban poor. With the urban poor, we have the big challenges of 880 million people living in slums to be accommodated in the next 15 years. And also with the population growth, we are expecting 2.5 billion people more before or until 2050, which makes another 1 billion dwellings expected in the next future. So it's a really big challenge, and we need immediate action. Next slide. One example, we know there are several initiatives and several actions. One is one from UN Habitat, and I suppose that Mr. Lalande is going to speak about it. With the city, we need principles and immediate action, while we recommend cities to become more resilient, low carbon, and adapting to climate change. The next slide, please. So the city we need has to become regenerating, becoming resilient, low carbon, etc. One of an example from our where the institute is involved as a European research project is the City Exchange project, where we have a co-creation process involving the population towards energy positive districts. And this is a kind of very interesting way of considering existing and future housing and how to make these housing fit for the future, and especially including all the citizens. So this is a interesting initiative, but there are much more initiatives. And of course, if you look at the next slide, my last slide, we are, as the ISOCARP Institute, really strongly supporting this initiative. Next slide. Yes, because we are convinced that we need to raise a global awareness on this issue. At the moment, it is not really discussed globally. It is discussed on national level, on the European level maybe, but not on the global one. And this is why we would like to support and develop this integrated platform to share intelligence and knowledge, but also showcasing different initiatives and different good examples and good experiences. So looking forward to the results and the discussion of today's Urban Thinker Campus. Thank you, Max.
Thank you very much, Didier, for your words. I would like now to introduce Christophe Lalande, the housing lead specialist at the Land, Housing and Shelter section of the UN Habitat. And we all know that UN Habitat focuses a lot on good urban planning, but the name itself, Habitat, involves a lot of talk about housing. So we are looking forward to hearing what the UN Habitat has to say. Mr. Lalonde, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Max, and thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Perfect. And thank you very much to for your very kind invitation. To Strelka KB and to ISOCARP. We are very thankful to be participating in this panel today. And first of all, if we can move to the first slide. I'm very sorry, I need to ask you for that. But I think that Madame Maleva pointed out the right issues at the beginning. And many of the points I actually wanted to raise were perfectly explained by her in her presentation. I think this was the right assessment. And somehow it's also a strange situation because you're right that at the time when we initially started seeing mass housing being produced, especially in the European post-war, it was synonymous of progress and well-being. It was really accompanying a process of rural to urban migration, industrialization, but also reconstruction. And for many people living in this new housing stock, it was very important progress and new lifestyle. We are again today talking about the issue of lifestyle and changing cultures and living modes. And over the past couple of months, I think that this is a perception that has been increasingly acute. We have all seen that the pandemic has seen emerge many challenges related to the different ways that we are experiencing housing, and somehow also becoming more strict with this ideal of comfort, and how we also want to see housing connected with the rest of the city. But in a way, I would not like to compare the mass housing that was built in the 50s, 60s, and the mass housing experiences that we still see being implemented in some places today. I think the context is somehow different. And there are some solutions also to be addressed in relation with the agenda that Habitat is pushing for, which is the new urban agenda, but also the various approaches in connection with the World Urban Campaign that we are promoting. So basically, there is this context where we are. I think that the initial presentation explained it much better than I will now. There is a demographic pressure. We mentioned the very high rate of people living in informal settlements globally. This is part of the issues, but there is also demographic pressure on many cities around the world, with people moving to the cities and with an increasing need to accommodate more people. If we want to put that into numbers, it will be about 100,000 units that are required every day until 2030 in order to accommodate these new people. So of course, it's very tempting to be willing to produce mass housing at scale. Something that also relate to the topic of our discussion and to our campaign this year is the increased hazards that are connected to climate change. And we are also encouraging our member states, our partners, to rethink how is actually housing contributing, but can also adjust to this new reality of the changing climate and this new threat. We also have an overall framework. I mentioned the new urban agenda. In the context of the European region, there is also a very well-detailed roadmap on the urban agenda, but we are also working now in the decade of action towards the realization of the SDG 11.1, mostly on affordable housing towards 2030. Actually, for Europe, we recently launched a new study together with the Commission for Europe called Housing 2030, paving the way towards the realization of this goal and the realization of the right to adequate housing for all, listing all the issues that are being faced in the sector of housing in the European region. But something that we're also like seeing is beyond the issues related to housing. These are like cities that are increasingly more fragmented, divided, and that instead of being places of hope, places of opportunities for people, actually like becoming places of segregation. And somehow, I mean, I would like to conclude this first slide by coming back to one of my favorite quotes from our executive director, Madame Sharif, when we are usually talking about our programs on housing. She always says we are not promoting to build housing units. It's not building housing, it's building cities. And I think that this is summarizing what UN Habitat's approach is, what is the approach in the new urban agenda and in the housing at the center approach. This is an opportunity, this new housing stock to be built, the possibility to revise this mass housing also stock that exists in order to build more coherent and more equal cities. So I would like to go to the next slide, please. So this is like a very short summary of our mandate as a UN agency. We have a very small program within the UN system. We are in charge, as you mentioned, of the implementation, promotion, and protection of the right to adequate housing. This is at the core of the mandate of UN Habitat. And of course, if we work on the variety of topics such as urban planning, of course, it's always in views of like achieving the right to adequate housing for all. In our work on housing, there are like three main components. The first one is really like working to promote the work and support member states in the design of policy framework in order to implement sustainable housing practices. So we work hand in hand with national and local governments in the design of affordable housing policy and financial mechanism. The second is our work on the promotion and protection of the right to adequate housing, prevention of forced evictions. This is really key. This is connected to the DNA of UN Habitat. And in many ways, the cultural dimension of this right is very important when we are talking about mass housing repeated at scale. And finally, one other important area of our work on housing is our work in the field of sustainable construction and production, where we partner a lot with the UN Environment Programme, but also with other UN agencies in order to promote sustainable and resilient housing design and solution. I would like to go to the next slide, please. This is like a very quick reminder of an approach that we promoted some years ago in preparation for the third conference of Habitat 3 in Quito in 2016 to inform the new urban agenda. And this is very valid still today. And when we talk about housing at the center, actually, this is in spirit the opposite of what mass housing is representing in today's world. Housing at the center is connecting housing with the city design, with a people-centered approach, and also like having an approach that is not sectoral, but really looking at all the dimensions that are connecting with housing. So connecting housing with the need for jobs, education, access to services, connectivity for transport. Next slide, please. And I think that I went already like through these points, so I will be able like to move to the next points. So when we talk about mass housing, of course, we see like very key challenges that that are actually related to the standardization and the monotony of the construction. These are like indirect, but also direct social and environmental costs. Often mass housing are built on the periphery of cities, sometimes very far away from cities. This leads to social segregation, lack of access to urban opportunities, but also lack of access to urban infrastructure, lack of opportunity for income generation in the neighborhood. So it's very often limited, only like to provide beds for people to sleep and go to work in the city. So there is like no life around it. The design and construction, like very often, is like standardized. It doesn't match at all the cultural aspiration from the countries, from the cities. I mean, you will see the same design, the same housing units being produced all over the planet by the same architects. So this is something that is also like symptomatic of mass housing. But perhaps, and something that is more worrisome is that mass housing doesn't respond to the social and cultural needs of people, and in a way, it also like prevent the realization of the right to adequate housing. One point that will be of interest in our discussion today is like the low energy efficiency that is characterizing the old mass housing stock, but also like the new one. Next slide, please. So we have like some recommendation that we usually use when we intervene in countries on programs related to mass housing. First of all, when we talk about retrofitting or renovating the old housing stock, we are considering to design this into a long to short term strategy to deliver sustainable urbanization. So this connects again to this idea of not building housing, but building cities, to use the needs and aspiration of the communities, of the people. This is really important, especially when mass housing is used as a solution for slum upgrading. We see that in some countries. This is very important to really like encourage this participatory process, and then the new housing stock is also considering the needs of like the community and like the social fabric that is also existing in these informal areas. The need to connect with mobility and urban infrastructure. This is also like really important. There is no adequate housing without access to connectivity services. We also want to promote local income opportunities and, to place like public services and like access to educational services as well. On the next slide, please. And finally, one point that will be particularly important in our discussion today, this is what type of solution can we bring to address the challenges of mass housing from the point of view of climate change. In our work at UN Habitat, we have developed a series of tools and guidelines to promote sustainable housing, sustainable buildings. These are like some examples. We have a tool that is called Sherpa, that is to become now a certification tool for low-income housing. We have been piloting this assessment tool in some countries on some real estate development project or mass housing project delivered by government. This is like very interesting because it's allowing us and our partners to really like reflect about the future of the housing stock, the cultural dimension of it, but also like the environmental sustainability of the housing stock in the future. We also have like specific tools in which we like this green building intervention that we have been using to increase the energy efficiency in the old social housing stock in Eastern Europe. Next one, please. And we also have a methodology that we have been using in the implementation of mass housing retrofitting or slum grading that is called the Housing Studio. And basically, this is a platform where we are bringing together the communities, but also academia from different countries to look at like some common challenges in order to define some solutions that are really participatory, learning from the experiences of other cities, other countries. So this is one program of UN Habitat, the Housing Studio, that is clearly like a sort of hands-on approach on addressing housing needs for people and looking for solutions for retrofitting in poor urban areas. Finally, I would like to conclude more as an invitation because I heard the presentation from Didier and the plan of ISOCARP to have an integrated platform to share intelligence and knowledge. I think that's very, very welcome. And actually next month, we will host virtually from Nairobi a series of expert group meeting to present a new housing initiative, which we are calling the Global Housing Compact. It's supported by some member states and diversity of partners. The idea is really like to build a global think tank for all our partners to reflect on the issues of housing and to look for common solutions across the continents and across countries. So thank you very much for that. Final word to conclude. Also, I'm also inviting all of you to participate in the World Urban Forum that will take place in June in Katowice in Poland. this will be like the most important event of the year for all of us interested in housing and urban issues. So we very much look forward to see you in Katowice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lalonde, for your both your words, but also for your invitation to those to Katowice, and also for this announcement about this think tank on housing by the UN Habitat, the Global Housing Compact next month. I think it sounds very promising. We will now give the floor to, we've changed a little bit the program, and we will give the floor to Mr. Von Lojewski, who was a constraint. And so we will then, after him, pass on to Mr. Oshima. So Mr. Von Lojewski, if you can turn on your microphone now, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. So I don't only have a time, but also a physical constraint. As you can see, I'm in a train. Hope the connection won't be too feeble. I have a little bit contradicting positions to the positions Habitat just pointed out. We have made our peace with mass housing in Germany. Means we do not discuss any more demolition or a reshape of these areas, but we rather see the potentials in it. And I would like to present to you two a little bit, well, maybe even too simple perceptions. The first is the economies of scale. When we start renovating mass housing, we always have an advantage due to the economies of scale. That means we spare money per square meter. Very simple. And this is an advantage which cannot be underestimated. The second is the Pareto principle. We gain a lot of energy efficiency by simply applying 80% what could be done with 20% of the amount of money. You might know this Pareto principle of economies. And that gives us a decisive advantage, as with a rather limited amount of money compared to other typologies of housing, we can achieve quite a rapid gain in energy efficiency. The third message is an architectural and planner-wise message. That means if we touch mass housing areas, we may not only focus on energy efficiency, but we need to focus on the environment of these areas, on services, public amenities, connection by sustainable traffic means, by green areas, social spaces, and so on and so forth. What is our prime hazard is that we lose the connectivity, the social cohesion in these areas, when we only focus on technical matters. And hence, we, for the last 30 years, have gathered quite some experience in rehabilitating these mass housing areas, and we are going now in the second and third turn of rehabilitation. Hence, we see the asset in all these areas, from Germany up to Vladivostok, north and south, east and west, and we utterly pledge for a rather positivistic approach in dealing with these areas. They are an asset, especially in our city centers, because we have low-cost housing in the city centers, yet many of our cities in Germany, and they are also an asset in terms of rehabilitation, renovation, energy efficiency, and therefore, not to mention that they are simply home to millions and millions of people. Therefore, we have to deal with it. We have to deal with this typology in a positive sense, and may not limit ourselves as architects and planners to the energy efficiency issue, but rather have to expand to integrated, quarter-oriented approaches with all the specificities and features I mentioned. This is my very brief contribution to your discussion. And I like very much the introductory remarks from Ekaterina, which also gave a rather positive connotation on these areas. And you will later on hear with Lacaton Vassal how we can deal with these areas and give them a totally different architectural and also social feature. Cohesion in these areas is the asset I would like to strengthen. And maybe these are trivialities, but I realize whenever I'm traveling to the East that these trivialities need to be spread. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you for understanding that this contribution is rather brief and without a presentation.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Wątpliwski, for having joined us, despite the fact that you are traveling at the moment. And I think it was very interesting to have a different viewpoint. And I think that we agree with you on the fact that interesting solutions, such as the one that you mentioned by Lacaton and Vassal, have shown that there is a potential in redesigning, and also that what Yekaterina Malieva was saying, that we cannot just destroy all the existing housing because it exists and it would be too costly to destroy it. And Christophe Hutin, the architect who was involved alongside Lacaton and Vassal, will later on present the project in Bordeaux that you mentioned, by the way. I will now give the floor to Mr. Oshima from the OECD and senior policy analyst at the OECD. Mr. Oshima, if you would like to turn on your microphone, I will share my screen with your presentation.
Okay, hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Atsuhito Oshima, and I'm a senior policy analyst at the OECD. And thank you for giving me this opportunity. Today, I would like to talk about key challenges around mass housing, based on my previous housing policy experience in Japanese government and on the OECD program that we are working on. If you can go to the next slide. So first, let me start with Japan's mass housing case. Due to rapid population growth after 1950s, Japan has developed a large residential apartments and single detached housing areas, mostly in metropolitan suburbs. Some areas tend to have steep slopes, stairs, detached house without barrier-free design, and lack in commodity stores in a walking distance. In order to keep up with the rapidly growing housing demands, they have very simple and uniform designs. If you can go to the next slide. Now, more than 50 years have passed. Now Japan is facing a completely different society and challenges. The population of Japan started to decrease in 2008, and now we have about 8 million vacant houses. One of the most important challenges is how to address rapidly aging population. In particular, in the areas where mass housing were mainly located, residents of similar age grow older at the same time, and now they're in their 70s and 80s. This map shows the increase of the senior citizens aged 75 or over in relation to past large-scale residential developments. As you can see, where large-scale developments are located, the elderly population is growing very fast. So we have very different challenges right now. If you can go to the next slide. So there are a variety of challenges but around mass housing in Japan, but I would like to point out 3 of them. So first, aging and depopulation, how we can adapt our mass housing and its areas to demographic change. For example, how to provide wheelchair accessible housing and daily life support for aging residents in these areas. Second point is housing affordability. How can we provide mass housing, affordable housing using this mass housing for low-income households? It is the last point, but not least, the building maintenance and safety. Even if it is public or private, there are tons of mass housing facing the issue of maintenance and safety. Next slide, please. And another big challenge is how to decarbonize building stock. As mentioned, buildings account for 40% of global energy-related CO2 emissions, including construction and energy use in buildings. And if you look at the energy increase, it's mainly from floor area growth globally. So if you look at both emerging economies and the advanced economy, they have very different set of conditions for building. First, emerging economies have rapid population growth, rising purchasing power, and 85% of floor area growth in emerging economies by 2050. So the focus of the policies to reduce carbon emission would be on new construction. On the other hand, in advanced economy, we have slow population growth, stable purchasing power, slow turnover rate of building stock. So clearly, we have to focus on renovation. So there are very different set of contexts according to where you live. Next slide, please. So now we look at, related to mass housing, we look at, if you look at the energy efficiency of buildings by age, old buildings consume energy that could be saved in new ones. So for example, in the EU, this is based on EU building database, that buildings built before 1945 is about 2.5 times lower in energy performance of buildings, of building envelope than recent buildings. And more than 60% of buildings were built before 1980, when energy efficiency measures were mostly introduced. So clearly, old buildings, how to renovate or modernize these building stock would be a challenge here. Next slide, please. And we, in the policies to reduce carbon emissions, we have building energy codes, and building energy codes are mainly applied to new construction. However, if you look at the new constructions compared to existing housing stock, this is the graph of share of new construction compared to old housing stock, and you can see that in most countries it's about 1% or less. Talking about Russia, it's 1.5%, about 1.5%. It's still, if you only decarbonize new buildings, it doesn't affect the overall energy consumption or overall carbon emissions from building sector. So clearly, renovations and how to modernize, especially mass housing stock, would be very important. Next slide, please. So what's important here is that energy consumption and buildings differ across regions. So if you look at the left-hand side graph, metro regions emit 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions in the OECD countries, and with high share from buildings. If you look at the right-hand graph, best performing regions consume 3 times less energy at home than the worst regions within the country. So, and in addition, cities, suburbs, and rural areas have very different contexts in various aspects, such as build climate, building stock composition, population and floor area growth, and poverty and affordability. So, so it is very important to look at diverse place-based contexts. Next slide, please. So this is my last 2 slides. So another point is that cities and regions can play a key roles in building building decarbonization. First, subnational governments are very familiar with local factors like building stock and all the policy conditions. They are in a good position to implement policies and plan, have a locally tailored planning. The second point is regulatory measures. We have, local governments and regional governments have, authority over building energy codes, and sometimes it's created by national government, but some governments are in charge of building energy codes, and then some cities and regions have higher level of stricter building energy codes than their national counterparts. In addition, if you look at the public buildings, including offices and other stuff, subnational governments have a large share of public buildings, and then they can improve their own buildings too. Third point is that financing and business models. And then if you look at the COVID recovery packages, a lot of cities and regions have already started to invest in energy efficiency of buildings and housing. And fourth, of course, subnational governments are very close to let's say, citizens and local stakeholders. So clearly, it is very important that cities and regions can play a key role in modernizing mass housing stock and make it sustainable and climate friendly. So last slide, please. So while cities and regions can play a key role, also national governments have a key role in creating enabling environment for cities and regions. So it is very important to develop a whole of government approach, and we have studied this program, building energy efficiency in cities and regions, and then this have three key components, including knowledge sharing by policy seminars and tailored case studies, demand-driven case studies, and localized analysis based on survey. So if you're interested in, please contact me. And my conclusion is that based on considering the very different local context, we really have to think the regional diversity and the key role of cities and regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oshima, for this interesting perspective from Japan, and which shows, as was already shown by other previous speakers, that this problem of mass housing renovation is a worldwide problem. And it was very interesting to see that it was useful, of course, to build energy efficient new housing, but since the stock of housing is so big, we definitely need first to renovate the existing stock. And the perspective on aging population was also an interesting point. Thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Thomas de Béthune, who works as team leader for urban policy at the European Commission. And we would be interested to know, since the European Union has not a mandate on housing, but has a very important indirect role on housing through the Green Deal, notably. We're very interested to hear what instruments exist at European level to tackle mass housing renovation.
Thank you, Mike.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Indeed, I have been asked to give the EU, the European Union, and the Commission in particular, the European Commission perspective in this field. So making housing available by renovating or building, in particular affordable housing, is a concrete way to improve citizens' well-being and achieve climate neutrality, what we all speak about already today. Yet this should be matched with adequate investments at all levels. And for us in the European Union, it is at EU, but also national, regional, and city level, with whom we work on a daily basis. Let me first share with you some figures about the state of, I would say, housing in the EU. Obviously, buildings are responsible for 40% of our total energy consumption. That has been already shown by other speakers, while roughly 75% of the building stocks is energy inefficient, and only 1% of buildings undergo energy efficient renovation every year. So it would be a century needed to renew them all to make them energy efficient. 800,000 social housing units requires renovation per year, which represent 5% of the total social housing stock in the EU. And 450,000 new social homes are needed per year to meet needs on the ground with the demand. If you look at the social angle and the energy poverty that has also been mentioned, 34 million people across the European Union live in energy poverty. And on average, the housing represents 20% of household expenses. And this ratio can double to 40% for the poorest households. And obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened people's ability to cover housing-related expense and increased homelessness and rising electricity, gas prices as well. And the prices of the housing is increasing since early 2000. On the investment angle, the EU member states' public expenditure on housing development decreased by nearly 30%, 27.8%, from 29 to 21 billion over the decade period 2008-2018. There is an investment gap for social and affordable housing in the European Union, which is estimated at 57 billion per year. So all these figures, because actually what we see from most recent housing policy shift internationally is, and that's the UNEC 2015 study showing that there is a transfer of responsibility for housing more and more from central to local authorities. Cities are increasingly asked to finance, manage, distribute housing assets, and this change gives cities opportunities and to build innovative housing solutions fit for the realities of the housing market post-crisis. We can speak about the financial crisis a few years ago, and also about the COVID crisis just for the moment. So cities are really a key player in developing housing provision and rehabilitation while working creatively with all types of housing providers, private, public, and community. The experience shows that the reliance on one sector to provide housing brought quite limited results, but also promoting sustainable land use, as often cities are the ones responsible for the land use at local level. Now about the EU level, housing and social policies fall under the responsibility of the member states, as you mentioned, Max. But the challenge I just mentioned are shared challenge across all the EU. And the European Commission is responding to this challenge in different ways. By defining strategic vision and shared targets, and here we can also refer to the international dimensions, by mobilizing investment and developing, providing tools for the cities in particular, and by leveraging stakeholders' partnerships and providing technical assistance, helping cities and actors on the first line. Let me first set a little bit about the strategic vision and targets to build political momentum. And here I would have to obviously mention the Green Deal, which sets out to make Europe the first climate neutral continent by 2050. And this is the new prosperity strategy for the EU, cutting across all policy areas. And to mention here a couple of important milestones in the past months. In June this year, the new climate law entered into force that not only embeds our climate neutrality goal in the EU law, but also fixes clear steps on that path, reducing net greenhouse gas emission by 55% by 2030. And to that end, in July 2021, the Commission presented a dozen of legislative proposals that you must have heard about, the Fit for 55 package, which delivers on this objective of 55% to deliver on the European Green Deal and transform this ambition into action. But we also have, beside this green dimension, the just dimension, which is part of the European Pillar of Social Rights Action Plan, where the focus is mainly on the rights for social housing. and the whole actions on the renovation wave, which has the main objective to double the renovation rate of buildings by 2030, and renovation of 35 million buildings and creating 160,000 jobs. We have updated also our industrial strategy to support the recovery of industry and accelerate the green and digital transition. And the European Commission has identified 14 industrial ecosystems, among them the construction and proximity and social economy ecosystems, which represent 90 to 95% of the SMEs. Affordable housing finds its place in them, obviously. And you have also most probably heard, as we are surrounded by architects and urban planners, about the new European Bauhaus, this big initiative which actually brings the Green Deal to our living places and the products we consume, and calls for a collective effort to build a future that is sustainable, inclusive, and beautiful. First image was shown today by the reproductivity of the same type of architecture everywhere on different countries in the globe. It promotes a new lifestyle where sustainability matches style, thus accelerating the green transition in various sectors of our economy, such as construction, furniture, fashion. Among key actions, funding for social housing projects that follow the new European goals, and obviously the mass housing issue is part of this ambition. You might also have heard about the new Leipzig Charter, which is our common European Union ambition, urban ambition between the member states and the EU. It has been adopted in November 2020 under the German presidency, and it shares the same vision of a just, productive, and green city. It is a reference charter for the development of policies at local, regional, national, or EU level. The principles set out by the charter are focusing on an important dimension that was mentioned also by my colleague of the UNSC, UN Habitat, on integrated approach, multi-level governance, place-based approach, participation, and co-creation of urban policy for the common good. Housing is identified in the Charter in nearly all priorities as a key sector to invest in. That's on the strategic side. On the investment and provide funding tools, I will here maybe be a bit more quicker, otherwise it would take really hours, but you might have heard about the big European Recovery and Resilience Facility, which represents a huge pot of money of 672 billion euro, which is the investment post-crisis that has been launched to support the green and digital transition and social inclusion. And among other priorities, it must give member states the opportunity to invest in housing. And out of the different plans that we have received so far, 14 member states have a direct component or dedicated action on social housing included, which is rather interesting to note. Beyond that, the funds of recovery, there is also the other parts of the budget that are more known, and in particular important for cities and local level, the cohesion policy, which has already invested a lot for the last 7 years in housing infrastructure and energy efficiency. Almost 1 million households benefited from cohesion policy support to make their building more efficient. And for the next 7 years, we are even increasing this focusing and concentration of the means by requiring the funds to be managed, or at least that the projects are helped being selected by the cities at local level, including some housing projects. We have, beside this big investment, also exchanging good practices program and innovation program. You might have heard, and for those who are interested, the embark program is an exchange of good practice between cities in Europe. And in the future, we'll continue with the Western Balkan countries as well to develop and transfer good practices between cities, but also the forthcoming European Urban Initiative, which is the new way of financing innovative actions at local level. We have there 85 highly innovative actions in cities funded. Some of them are about housing, but also circular economy. I could note the issue of the demolition products of the renewing of housing. There is there, for example, a really interesting innovation about how to reuse this in the city and in Barcelona, if I remember well, beaches, to use it as a new sand to fight against climate change, for example. But also the Horizon Europe and the climate neutral cities. You might have heard the objective to have 100 climate neutral cities by 2030 in the EU. The launch of the call has been done last week or 2 weeks ago, and we will have a huge initiative on transforming the cities. And why we are speaking at cities or neighborhood level and not about individual housing, it's really because we are promoting here a much more integrated and city level policy. You might have heard also about the European Investment Bank funding called ELENA, where you've got, and it means European Local Energy Assistance, which provides technical assistance for energy efficiency and renewable energy investments targeting buildings and innovative urban transport. My third pillar is about the partnerships, where I could refer here to the urban agenda for the EU. And my colleague here, Michaela Koer from Vienna City, we will say much more about that. But to say that we have here urban agenda partnerships that are led by member states and city, and the role of Commission is to facilitate this multi-level governance mechanism, where we aim at improving regulation, funding, and knowledge on major themes of the urban issues within the EU, housing being obviously part of it. We have also newly launched the Affordable Housing Initiative, which is also part of the Green Deal and which has the objective to develop and pilot 100 lighthouse renovation districts with a smart neighboring approach, also providing blueprints for replications. In conclusion, the European Green Deal, it's more than a climate policies. I think that you have seen the number of activities I just listed that are linked to it. It promotes a whole of society, whole of government approach that touches upon all sectors of the economy, all generation for the green transition to really happen. And in a way that no one is left behind, we need everyone on board. The city governments play an important role in its implementation, engage with local stakeholders, providers, and citizens, and commit to a clear and concrete climate-related pledge, could both demonstrate the climate commitment and inspire other European cities to take similar action. And when renewing housing, this can only be done in the context of integrated and sustainable urban development strategy. This is essential to move from a project-based approaches to enable implementation for a city as a whole, from its functional areas to its neighborhood. But, and you can understand really well that the Commission alone and action is not enough. We are really playing here the role of a facilitators, but the national, regional, and local authorities are the engine for the housing, and in particular social or affordable housing projects. This is where the political leadership and involvement of experts and private sector can make a difference on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Bethune. I think for those who thought that the European Union was too high level to tackle housing, you've shown the diversity of action and the extent. And I think that the two approaches that you've pictured in the strategic part of your presentation about both a green dimension and a just dimension, tackling social housing and affordable housing. Granted that housing prices have gone up in the last 20 years, I think was very interesting. And it gives a lot of instruments and sites and initiatives to look at for our audience. I would also like to tell our audience, use this opportunity to tell them that if they wish to ask questions, please use the chat. You can write down your questions, and at the end of all presentations, we will try to answer all of them if the time limit allows it. I will now, to keep on with the EU dimension, I will give the floor to Michaela Koer, who works as director of the Brussels Liaison Office of the City of Vienna, and who was also coordinator of the EU Urban Agenda Housing Partnership, as Thomas de Bethune mentioned. And so she will show, in more detail, she will focus on one of the instruments of the European Union, and with this dimension of partnership that is very important to make any renovation project successful. Michaela, the floor is yours.
Yes, hello from Vienna. I will try to share my screen first, so we're all operational. And voila. I hope it works. Yes, it should work. And yeah, I'm very happy to speak here today with such a great community of experts from different levels of government, indeed. I am also happy that being a city representative and coming from Vienna, part of my little intervention will clearly also be to tell a little bit about my city, Vienna, who has some kind of reputation clearly on housing solutions. But this is a little bit an outline. I will not repeat the things that have already been said by colleagues Christophe Lalande and Thomas de Bethune on some of the aspects I wanted to touch. But I will try to again repeat a bit what are the housing challenges we face today, linking all these to the global agenda, looking into the situation in European cities and regions, touching a little bit on the role of the European Union and what now Max has mentioned, the way we try to develop ideas, solutions, recommendations on EU level in the format of a housing partnership in the frame of the urban agenda for the EU. And then I just give a comment, personal one. How do I think that it's necessary to rethink housing policies in general? And clearly closing with a small epilogue. So don't be afraid, it's not going to be that long as it looks now. But I just wanted to set the scene in a more, holistic way. So that's going to be hard, not so hard. We've seen that there are the climate challenges. We've seen that there are the social challenges. We've seen that there are the poverty challenges a lot. I think that it's important to highlight that when we come to talk about housing challenges, not only in Europe, but also in Europe, it's not a crisis of the most vulnerable groups in society anymore. It's a crisis of the middle class. And that is something that we should remember always when we talk about affordability of housing. It's already, and the OECD has done a very good study about that, it's a housing crisis has hit the middle class in the meantime. And that means that one, for instance, cannot afford to live in the same house his or her parents bought like 30 years ago. You can only afford like half of the size or pay the double price in the meantime in European cities. And the same clearly also accounts for the rent increases. So 3 aspects that are, I think, key to also discuss the housing crisis are the aspects of gentrification, financialization, and touristification. These are really 3 developments that are affecting our housing markets all over Europe severely. And I think that EU and member states and cities, regions, housing policies need to react to those developments as well. So what we've seen also, we cannot talk about housing without talking about the corona pandemic. All of the housing policy approaches that we've seen, they have been reviewed in the light of corona. There were a lot of things that were going on in many, many cities in order to better protect citizens from being evicted. These kind of things were happening. And I think that this is a little bit more, gives another picture to the discussion. Now, when it comes to talk about the cities and how they are affected, if you look at house prices and rents in the EU in the past 10 years, more or less, we've seen all of these increasing severely. And that has also clearly also led to a higher risk of poverty. Thomas has already mentioned the numbers for Europe. I think that this also has an aspect with regard to city budgets we should not underestimate, as this also leads to another problematic correlation. The more we spend now on housing welfare allowances, the less we can invest in infrastructure investment. And that is also a problem. And we have seen also that the corona crisis will bring our public budgets further under pressure. So here again, I would say we need to refocus a little bit on the side of how can we invest in order to create stable and long-term solutions in order to, also help in the long term our citizens. So that's an aspect I wanted to highlight as well, and that's clear. Now, Christophe has already done this. So a lot of cities have now, especially also under the corona threats, have started to implement housing as a human right. That we have seen a shift towards a rights-based approach in housing policy, and that also leads to a new way to look at the governance of housing policy and housing systems. So some of the responses we've heard about are things like on the EU level are the urban agenda for the EU. That's something where we also really tried in all the thematic partnerships that we had under this framework to also link them to the sustainable development goals, to the global agenda, and that was especially also true for the housing field. You all know this. I always like to remind everybody that SDG 11 talks about sustainable cities and communities, and the point has already been made that what we need to do, create sustainable housing systems to ensure access to adequate, safe, affordable housing for all, is that we need to have functioning communities. And that's something which has been reflected now also in some of the new approaches that we've seen coming up on EU level, like the Affordable Housing Initiative, the neighborhood-based approach, a lot of things that we've seen going on in cities and regions in the past were really only possible because there was an involvement of citizens in the creation and I would say upgrade of their living environment. Clearly, Housing 2030 project has already been mentioned. I will skip it. What we've seen is that we have a unique fabric of housing solutions across European cities and regions. So this is also, I would say, a resource, an important resource to define also new ideas, to find new ways to solve cities. We can look around the continent and see that there are things that have been developed in the past that were clearly working very well, despite all the difficulties that cities face a lot when it comes to lack of investment, the high costs of construction, even more so after the corona pandemic with not, the delivery chains are not working anymore. So we really need to do the circular construction agenda now, but also the incredible costs for building ground, scarcity of lands, and added to that, a reluctancy to have strong regulation and state intervention in the sector because the market does not deliver affordable housing for all. This is why we need to regulate the market. And that accounts for all the aspects of gentrification, touristification, and financialization. So it's going to be also the approach to, target at a cost-based rents and housing costs and not a profit-based housing costs and rents. So really a change in the mindset that is really necessary, and it's only feasible if you do allow for strong regulation and intervention on all levels of government. So we've seen, and I'll just share that later on, there is a major shift in property structures, as in Berlin, for instance. We've seen Amsterdam as a city where the financialization has really hit the city very, very much. And it's not only going into the centers of the city, the attractive, centers, but it's also in the peripheries of the cities. And I'll just share that later on. There is a major shift in property structures. There is a problem with my connection, I think. Anyway, Amsterdam as a city where the financial translation. I'm sorry, there's an issue with my connection.
I don't think it was with your connection. I think it was with the live translation into Russian for our audience in Russian.
Okay.
We're sorry for the disagreement. Please go on.
Okay, I go on. I'm sorry. So what we did in the Urban Agenda Housing Partnership that was working for 3 years in full format, and it was composed, and I think this was an interesting exercise and experience for all of us. It was composed by cities, member states, EU institutions, the Commission, the investment bank, knowledge hubs like embark, and obviously also important stakeholders in the affordable housing sector. these partnerships, we had 14 of them, and I was one of the coordinators of the one on housing. We were working on how can we develop proposals to create more affordable housing of good quality across EU cities and regions and states. And we looked clearly at a lot of things, but what we did also, we focused on a broad spectrum of the housing continuum. So if you look at the housing continuum, it's social housing, affordable rental, affordable home ownership. And when you look at this, there are so many different ways that cities and regions and countries have found to provide for affordable, adequate, safe, and healthy housing in the past, that we do not really have to reinvent the wheel all the time. We just need to adapt some of the instruments and look into participatory approaches with regard to neighborhood development and things like that. So what I'm very proud of, one thing is that the action plan of this housing partnership has been taken up by the major EU institutions in the meantime. The Committee of the Regions of the European Union, the Economic and Social Committee of the European Union, and the European Parliament have taken up the plan and have endorsed it in a way, especially also the member states did that. So when they met at the informal ministerial on urban matters in Bucharest in 2019. So I think that we really did a good job, and now we see that this, and it's not only our work, clearly it's the crisis that pushes for changes, but it's also the general, I would say, acceptance that it's necessary to talk about affordable and healthy and safe housing when we talk about a good life quality for all our citizens. So this is something we've been doing, and we did it also under a very, very strong gender aspect. We think that when we talk about housing affordability, we cannot neglect the fact that affordability is always a relationship between income and expense. And when we talk about that, we need to see that there in the EU, we have a gender pay gap of 16% between women and men. And we have, and that's more severe even, a gender pension gap between men and women of 40%. So clearly, and when we now do also see the energy crisis coming, we need to have solutions that also are, I would say, designed to fit the difficulties that women encounter when it comes to housing and affordability and energy costs. So here we are there with a lot of new initiatives on EU level, which to my mind, I would value them as a change in mindset. Coming from a city, clearly, I'm never satisfied with all of this because I know the difference. I know the difference when it comes, for instance, to Vienna. And this is my last comment. When you really have a strong state and a strong public actor as the city since many, many years, then you end up in a situation that is really crisis-proof. We've been proving that our model in Vienna, and we had big mass construction as well, and they were architecturally in the beginning perfect and fine. In the 60s and 70s, this changed a bit. We can discuss all that from the point of view of, aesthetics, but still we have 2 in 3 Viennese that live in municipal, cooperative, or publicly funded homes. And that means that we have created urban fabric that is very protective to all our citizens. And we continue on that path that we started 100 years ago. We are still leading on doing very strong interventions in the market. We buy land and keep it for years and decades sometimes until we need it to produce new housing. So on the side of scarcity of land, still we have issues, but we are very, very tough on that. We have a zoning law that says that in any new urban development, you need to have 2/3 of affordable or social housing. That's a clear intervention. But I think that this is also attractive for certain investors because they want to do work with us because our investment conditions are very stable and reliable. So to close, I think that when you want to do all of this, really aiming at implementing housing as a human right, and aiming at creating social cohesion and social mix all over your urban territory, you need to be quite bold when it comes to state intervention, because otherwise the market does not work for us. It's the citizens who have to have a say, because they're also paying for all of that, be it as taxpayers or as tenants or as homeowners. So there's a clear also financial argument to participatory approaches. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Michaela Kauer, for this very interesting topic, and it helped us go from the European level to the city level and see the partnership. And I really liked your insights about how the COVID-19 crisis has changed, reviewed the approach that we have in all policies related to housing, and also this insight about this gender gap and the fact that there's a lot of talk about affordability, but not all of us take into account this gender bias when tackling and talking about this affordability. And I think it was interesting to see the role of the city. And so now we're going to keep on at this local level, and we're going to give the floor to Christophe Hutin, who is an architect, a curator, and a film director. And this year, all of you might have watched the news and saw that Lacaton and Vassal received the Pritzker Prize, and they're famous mostly for their renovation project in Bordeaux. But not all of us know that this project was actually done by 4 architects and not only 2. And Christophe Hutin and also Frédéric Drouot were also on the team. And so Christophe Hutin will present the Grand Parc project renovation in Bordeaux, which has been celebrated this year a lot, and which is a good example of a successful renovation of mass housing units. Mr. Hutin, the floor is yours.
Good morning, all of you. Thank you for your invitation. I will share my screen, and so I can start to explain what we have done. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about a renovation project of 530 units in Bordeaux. Is the blocks that you can see on the background of this picture. This project was done, you have said, with Anne Lacaton, Jean-Philippe Vassal, Frédéric Drouot, and myself. We were doing a urban study during many years against the demolition, because in France we are having a strange urban policy, is to the urban renewal go through the demolition. And so we have demolished 80,000 units of social housing, which is a lot, and it cost a lot of public investment. So during this urban strategy, we did develop that we can transform the city and add and transform all the places. So this free building was like a case study to demonstrate what we wanted to do in terms of urbanism and densification. So it's a neighborhood from the 60s, a modern project, which is very rational, very a little bit brutal in this time. I think we are not more working in that way anymore. But the quality of the organization is good, and it allows also to give the space free on the ground, and to having like a lot of garden and free space. So this is the building I'm talking about. So it's 530 units. I have to tell you that these units did the job, did the work during 50 years, because a lot of families were staying there. And at the time when they were built, it was a very good quality, and people were very happy to go into this apartment. And during 50 years, a lot of the people are still in the apartment. They did take care of the apartment. So in terms of politic of urbanism, usually you look at this situation from the outside, like in this picture. And so you're having like, you consider it in a very simple way. You say it's a tower, it's a building. But I propose you to go inside these blocks. And when you visit each apartment, what I did and what we did with the photographer Philippe Rio, you discover that in fact it's 530 world marvelous, completely incredible. So when you go inside, you can see how the people are taking care of the apartment, and how the interior is very well done. And so the people, they write their own story inside these apartments. And so we decide to transform this building and taking care of that, starting from the life of the people and the story of the life. Because it's when the skill of the architecture is meeting the performance of the inhabitants. It's where the architecture can organize this meeting between a construction and the life project. So the project was done with the people inside the apartment during the construction time. It's very important because the building were still occupied during the work, and we did extend the building 4 meters large. And yeah, so it was very quick. It was a prefab concrete system, and you can see during the process. So we did transform a lot the image of the building, also what the people consider, or the representation they've got of this building. And this is the technical issue of what we have done. So you can see that the concrete floor in blue is the addition of the original apartment. We did remove the facade, and we move out the window, the small piece of wall. And so now you can have a sliding window, sliding glass window, very large, which is will allow the people to move out and to get a new relation with the climate and the fantastic view they've got in Bordeaux. And also we've got we call it a winter garden. It's 3 meters large, and after you got 1 meter of balcony, like in a Belvedere, in this fantastic situation. So this extension, it's a free space that you had for the apartment, for the living area, but it's also in terms of energy efficiency. It is also something works very well for the energy efficiency, because I cannot develop because we don't have a lot of time, but you can use the curtain, you can open and close the window, you can use the ventilation, the natural ventilation as you want, and the extension protect also from the sun the facade of the heated part of the apartment. So this is a floor of one level. It was before the construction. Okay, so it's a very functionalist approach. Each room is having a function, and you have to use a corridor to move into the rooms. So everything is a little bit narrow. You are a little bit locked inside with small window, and after that, this is the new situation. So it's like in a house, you can have outside space to move to move between the spaces, and the life is going out and the furniture is going out. What is very important is this project is a very simple structure, and it's an open partition, so the people can create the life they want to have inside this space, because we didn't give a function, or it's very undetermined in terms of use. So the people can. Very important for us that the people who are living in this apartment can have the benefit of the project. So they are still in the apartment after the construction, and the rental price was still the same also after the project, which is also a very important thing, because what the people can do. So they can the apartments, they must stay affordable for them. For example, a kitchen now, it's completely open, so you can move out from the kitchen. I'll show you some picture of the result and what the people have done. And also the relation with the climate is completely new, because everything can be very open, can breathe, and you are very related, you are very close to the climate. What is important also in terms of energy efficiency, in the last decade, we did believe that the industrial system will be the good input for the energy efficiency. I believe strongly that we have to be confident with the inhabitants, because they are the best experts of the daily life, and they know how to regulate the comfort and what they want to have in terms of comfort. And this is the key issue for me for the energy efficiency. If you don't empower the people in that issue, the results are not here. So you see how the people are taking care of the inside apartment? So they still have the same decoration, the same aesthetic, and they can just have the benefit of the new space and continue to extend the life they want to have with plants, with birds. Yes, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rutin, for this inspiring presentation. I think it was good to see after all those presentations at a higher level about policies and instruments, to see practically speaking how we could transform existing mass housing units into something different by both tackling the energy side of the building, so the energy efficiency with this winter garden facade, but also the social dimension with people not being moved out during the reconstruction and also after. And so the stability for the inhabitants is also a very key point, and it answers all the points that were made regarding affordability and social aspects that were raised by previous speakers before. And we will now stay at the local level and focus on the different example with the city of Moscow, and also with this approach by empowering the people. And so I will give the floor to my colleague Alexandra Chechetkina, who will talk about ESG principles using the case of Russia and Moscow. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to my colleagues for the invitation to join this discussion from different parts of the world on how should we address the housing issues. I will share my screen in a moment. Quite excited by all the messages I've heard today, and also to see the real example in such an extended way, because we of course see the photos of this building in Bordeaux, but seeing the more insights was quite inspiring. So thank you for bringing it to the table of the discussion. So I really would like to also add some of the thoughts on how we can address the renovation in our context, in Russian context, and also in the case of Moscow, and on a case of typical neighborhood. As previously in this conference was said, it's really a big issue. 3 billion people to be in need of affordable housing by 2030s, which is almost twice more than are in need of adequate housing at the moment. And also 50 years is the average age of the mass housing stock in developed countries. And more than 40% of urban housing stock actually in Eastern Europe has some massive structural problems at the moment. But not only the outdated mass housing, but also the environmental challenges that we're facing at the moment. So first of all, more than 70% of global energy related to CO2 emissions, they are released in cities. And just half of the global waste produced in cities. And this is like the direct connection to the housing issue. So the question then is how to adapt our existing cities, our existing buildings to the increase in urban population, to the developmental pressures which we experience in cities, and to the climate change. So renovation as an approach to the outdated mass housing issue has some challenges and also opportunities. I really enjoyed how it was said before that in Germany, you preferred not to look at this as some problems, rather seeing some opportunities and potentials in reworking with the old buildings rather than building new ones. So talking about renovation as an approach, first of all, the carbon footprint is something quite challenging because the demolition and subsequent construction of multi-story buildings really contributes hugely to the increase of CO2 emissions. In Moscow, it's a great number because usually what is happening now, the demolished buildings are something like 5 stories as in the picture, but the new buildings are built twice or 3 times higher. The second thing is quite important also, what is kind of also illustrated by the example from Vienna, is the keeping the residents and their social connections which are built in neighborhoods in place, because relocation of residents during the renovation process is something that really can disturb long-lasting social cohesion and connections of people. And lack of local involvement is also what we can see today in our local context, lack of engagement strategies, which really would lead to leads to lack of local involvement of people to the plans for the renovation. So in response to these challenges, we can really apply ESG principles, environmental, social, and governmental principles to kind of overcome some of the mentioned above. So talking about ease, the efficient use of available resources, buildings are built, as Ekaterina said in her presentation, 60 to 80% of housing, of buildings in cities are the residential buildings, and they are already built. So efficient use of these buildings, of these housing units, as well as ensuring the minimal environmental impact during the renovation of the buildings, but also during their further operation, is something which E can bring to this process of renovation. Then S, social, comfortable living, working, but also being able to build these connections in places, and also to keep the social connections, not only between neighbors, but also between residents and, for example, people who would sell you some of the vegetables on a daily basis. And governance, transparent mechanisms and tools which can stimulate renovation and subsequent economic development of territories that would also meet the interests of citizens, not only of cities and developers of these territories. So just to illustrate it a little bit more, if to start to imply these environmental solutions, here we can see like the project of renovation of almost a typical neighborhood in almost every city of Russia. We can see these buildings, but this project using some of the architectural even solutions like climatic buffers and bringing some clean energy to these neighborhoods and some greenery extensions to the walls of the buildings, accepting and developing some urban farming, because the scale of the building and of the neighbor's unit actually accepts that. Adding some CLT construction, which may lead to add maybe a few more floors to, meet this developmental pressure, but make it in an ecologically friendly way, then to use eco-transport and rain gardens. So even these set of solutions can lead to the reduction of the carbon footprint, 3.5 million tons less than demolition and new construction if was to be used as a method instead. In terms of social example, the improvement of life quality and maintenance of social cohesion would lead us to saving of more than 100,000 of long-lasting neighbor ties by, on the one hand, improved apartments, which also engage neighbors to communicate with each other, diverse sports and playgrounds which ensure inclusivity, some social infrastructure which actually exists now in the areas of these neighborhoods in Moscow and also in other cities of Russia, some well done open public spaces which also ensure the collective experience and communication, and of course accessibility, so that these places are accessible to all different kinds of people. And in terms of governance, maybe if to develop these new floors above the buildings existing, maybe the new income which is generated by these apartments may not only be gone to the developers or to other stakeholders, but may also be generated to the local residents, which actually may do something with this money to improve the local area where they live in regards to their, for example, their courtyard. The new land surveying and mixed financial programs, all of this, and in general local involvement to the renovation process and the resulting benefits can lead to up to 60% of residents in these districts to be renovated, and they will be participating in the development of their neighborhood. This is not a very extended and spread case at the moment. On the contrary, not more than even 10%, but actually, according to the publicly published information, not more than 4% of people which are living now in this housing that are under the program of renovation in Moscow are actually physically participating in the process of planning this renovation. And this is the aspect to be addressed for all the other buildings and neighborhoods we have in the cities and in the country in general. So in terms of environmental solutions, the key target would be to come towards the zero environmental impact, and by reduction of any possible negative impact during reconstruction and the life cycle of the building. For social solutions, to strengthen the local community, not only keeping the local community, but also some solutions to strengthen these neighborhood ties by enhancement of the quality of life and reinforcing the connectivity of these local communities. And for the governance solutions, the bottom-up public benefit developments and projects that would allow the actual users of this territory to also have some impact on how to develop this place for their day-to-day living by creating a framework of clear bottom-up decision-making process with shared benefits. And here are just some of the examples which we developed, and hope that this will actually help Moscow government and the governments of our other cities in Russia to start and develop these processes of renovation without demolition. So, for example, environmental solutions with carbon neutral materials and technologies, sustainable utilization of the resources, as efficient use of resources and renewable energy sources to ensure the minimal impact on the environment, and zero waste and climate resilience in vibrant ecosystems. All of this is actually possible solutions to apply already now. In terms of social solutions, to develop the mixed-use programs that would enhance this social communication between the residents and the guests of these places, diverse social groups, healthy spaces, and inclusivity of these spaces, and some of the private-public balance, which now is a little bit after all of these buildings are coming from the Soviet era, are still in search, so to say. And some governance solution examples as acceleration of the renovation by bottom-up initiatives, public-driven design, mixed financing as providing different mechanisms for renovation via raising funds from owners, the government, and the banks. And we come to the whole kind of ESG toolbox, which would help to make this process very inclusive, but also helpful not only for the environment, but the current residents there. And here is on the example of any typical neighborhood with coming from the Soviet time with 5-story buildings, which is more than half of the Russian housing stock. we can see like how these green roofs and facades and using local plants for in the landscaping, passive temperature regulation with the new balconies, as we just have seen in the previous project, and divided waste collection and rooftop renewable energy resources, and also some architectural solutions which change the whole view on these buildings. Set of these environmental solutions are implemented to preserve and maintain the ecological balance of these territories, to reduce the negative impact on the environment and maintaining the biological diversity, which is there in these areas because there is a lot of greenery and people really love to live in these neighborhoods due to the balance of this greenery, which they still can have in cities. And some examples of social solutions, and this group of solutions as relocation to a new house within the walking distance to give an opportunity for a current resident to keep in place and not be kind of forced to move to another neighborhood because of the process of renovation, or adding additional blocks for higher income residents, which also can maybe provide some social mix, also bringing some new money into the territory, which will be kept there. And also developing new cycle infrastructure and public rooftop space, which are not very much used at the moment. So a group of these solutions can focus on social improvements driven by the comfortable environment, safe environment, but also with a variety of opportunities for recreation, leisure, within a minute or 5-minute walk from home. So really these solutions can make possible to turn sparse areas into local centers of urban life, forming conditions for the development of social ties among these residents. And governance solutions, like, as we discussed, the new incomes generated apartments and mixed financing programs and new land surveying and participatory planning and ESG renovation grants, which may be as a solution to stimulate this renovation, and online support. So this strategic set of policies can create opportunities for a very open dialogue, for trust from the local residents to the government and to this program in general, and to the city authorities and developers, to frame the development in the district, as well as to ensure the introduction of new flexible financial and non-financial instruments which can allow the implementation of really high quality projects that meet the interests of all stakeholders, which we can see in these areas. So potential outcomes, on the one hand, by 45% could be the increase in the building footprint, creating more active neighborhood, bringing more intensity of use, diversification also, up to 30% increase of commercial and social areas to improve the social life and infrastructure in a walking distance, up to 35% density increase, activating street life and improving security, and up to 30% of additional apartment areas could be created. But also, all of this is with the saved buildings, not demolished, but reconstructed buildings. So thank you very much for the attention, and it's great to have an opportunity to discuss these topics with such a great panel of speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for your presentation. I think it was I think we've reached a consensus on the fact that there should be no demolition of mass housing units, because we've seen throughout the presentations all the instruments that exist to renovate them, make them energy efficient. We saw with your presentation, as well as with Christophe Hutin's presentation, that it was possible, it was feasible to redesign the existing units and to make them more viable for their residents. And maybe now is time for a quick discussion, because I feel that all of us had a lot to say, and so we're a bit running out of time. We have 10 minutes left for a discussion. Please, those who listen to us, ask your questions in the chat. that should be below the screen. I would like to start with the first question for Mr. Oshima about the money available, the funding available at the World Bank for countries involved in housing for housing initiatives. Is there a budget at the World Bank, and how does this work?
Sorry about that, but I'm not from World Bank, so I'm not sure.
I mean the OECD. Sorry, I'm a bit.
Okay.
I'm a bit. Yes, sorry for the confusion. Could you please explain what are there any funding available at the OECD level to support housing innovation initiatives? Sorry for the confusion about World Bank and OECD.
Okay. Actually, OECD is a membership-based research organization, so we don't have directly the funding for the cities and regions. So we are just researching. But as of my knowledge, as you mentioned, there are several multi-development banks which support energy efficiency investment in city level, like EIB or CEB. And as Mr. Beton mentioned, EU have a lot of funding for renovations, and they have renovation wave initiatives. So, there are a lot of funding available, but the problem is that how cities and regions can use that money, and how they can use it wisely and plan ahead to invest in renovation. Because we have individual property owners, but it's very difficult to encourage them to invest in renovations. So I think at local level, we need some strategy to aggregate renovation needs and bring in private and those funding money into renovations.
Thank you very much for your answer. And maybe since I was confused and I mistook OECD and World Bank, I will ask the same question to the World Bank about funding opportunities and also the challenges that exist. I understand your point about the fact that it's not only about funding available, but it's also about how local powers themselves use the available opportunities to. Would you like to tell us a bit more about the support that the UN Habitat could give to about funding opportunities?
Sorry, Max, you meant like funding opportunities from UN Habitat, or?
Yes, I meant yes.
Well, I'm afraid like my feedback will be quite similar to OECD. To the difference of like a DFI, we are not funding directly like infrastructural project. We're more providing technical support to member states. So it's much more, our activities like are much more focused in terms of advocacy and outreach or research. But actually, this is like the whole point of this new initiative we want to launch next month, this global compact for housing. The one element will be like to establish a global think tank with all the main partners. But the second one was actually a request coming from many countries, is to establish a sort of database of projects that are bankable. Very often we work many years with national or local government in establishing public policies, programs on housing. And very often these programs are not implemented because there is no resources or no funding. So the idea is actually to bridge the gap with the development banks with the country cooperation, like the Agence Française de Développement, or GIZ, or with like private investment opportunities from the real estate sector.
Could you please tell us also, since you announced the launch of this think tank that might interest a lot of our listeners and also speakers at this conference, who is welcome to join in this think tank with an amount? Is it cities, housing corporations? Who will be able to take part?
So it's quite open, but we are targeting already existing networks or large organization. So there is a sort of like more like working discussion that is happening now with some of our key partners. And the point will not to open like to actually open to organizations that already have a broad coverage of activities at the regional level. So like the African Development Bank, the different banks, other UN organization, and private sector partners when they have like also like a broad scope of operation. And academia, which is also like very important. We have like a lot of partnership with universities. So, but it will be more a network of networks.
Thank you very much for your answer. We only have time for a last answer. It's a very broad one, but I think it could sum up the discussion. It's why should it be forbidden to destroy? And I think, Mr. Hutin, you gave a bit of the answer, showing that the program that was conducted in France, the ENRU, led to the destruction of 80,000 housing units throughout its 20-year lifespan. And so money was invested in destroying instead of building additional units or redesigning units. But if some of you want to answer this question from our listeners, should we forbid, or why should it be forbidden to destroy? Please, I think all of you could answer. So I let you decide. Well, I let you step in if you wish to add something.
I just can answer quickly, just to say that I'm not in the position to take this kind of decision because I'm on the ground and I'm a very small art craft architect. But I think it can be a very strong decision and very important because architecture is very brutal and is not fair, is not taking care of the people who are living inside the architecture. And I just want to say that the subject for me of my field, of my work, is not the construction, is the life inside the construction. So we have to focus on that and not on it's a good rules that we can take, but in a political level. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. Indeed, it's good to remind that it's forbidden to forbid, and it's also the focus should be put on what people do with their housing. And I think this look on housing as not being just a bar or a tower of housing flats that we see from a distance, but to see it as a collection of people living together and enjoying a daily life, whatever it is, I think is a good approach. And I think we'll finish on this note. We will have now a short break for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes' time, we will meet again to discuss the result of the workshop that was conducted 2 days ago on Monday and yesterday on Tuesday. And we've asked, as Yekaterina Malieva has shown you in her introduction, we've asked them to work on case studies and to think of solutions for 4 locations and to how to renovate existing mass housing units. So we would be very interested to hear your feedback on those solutions. So meet you all at 10 in 8 minutes time.
All right. Good evening, good afternoon, and even good morning, everyone. And welcome to the second part of the Mass Housing Urban Thinkers Campus. I have a great pleasure to announce this second part with the results of the workshop. My name is Milan Ivkovic. I'm an advisor for ISOCARP Institute, and I will moderate the presentation of the results of this workshop. As you may know, the workshop took place online on the 18th and 19th of October. So it's yesterday and day before yesterday. And participants from more than 10 countries participated, divided in 4 different groups, 4 different thematic zones, and 4 different climate zones, all of them with one aim, and that is to find a solution for the massive housing upgrade according to the climate challenges we are going to face in the next decades. I would like to invite the participants of the first group, the first climate zone. Those are the participants who are dealing with massive housing block in Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, in tropical climate. So please, Elena Ovdenko and Mr. Drew Ball, can you come up front and just tell how and what did this group do?
Yes, hi, let's start. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, so hello everybody. We want to present our solution, how to work with blockhouse in tropical zone. Rio de Janeiro is famous for its beaches and favelas, but not for its mass housing units. The great wave of migration from the countryside to the cities is considered to be the primary cause for proliferation of favelas throughout Brazil. And tropical climates are characterized by a monthly average temperature of 18 degrees or high year-round. Annual precipitation is often abundant in tropical climates. There are normally only 2 seasons in tropical climates, a wet season and a dry season. The annual temperature range is normally very small, and sunlight is intense. So in the future, we will face various natural disasters, such as floods, landslides, heat waves, heat islands, and so on. So we need to be ready for these climate changes when think about future mass housing blocks. And also take mind about emissions. Today, nearly 40% of global carbon emissions are from construction. So today, Rio de Janeiro faces natural disasters. A lot of people live in houses unsuitable for life, favelas. City covered by heat island. As a result, the temperature rises above 1/4 degree in heating zones. There is also a constant risk of flooding of building. Adaptation of climate change due to reasons for changes in social, environmental planning aspects. We need to think about future society and healthy living, construction options, and different scenarios for life.
Keeping in mind the unique conditions of the context and its effect on the massive housing block, we suggest some interventions to increase the long-term resilience and decrease the environmental stress it is likely to face till 2100. Our main areas of focus are facade, rooftop, balcony, entry area, public space, and the building morphology itself. Our solutions concentrate on using nature-based solutions, for example, natural air cooling, making more green zones, and creating a bioswale to collect extra rainwater runoff and mitigate the potential risk of flooding. Our interventions seek to transform the block from a rigid, foreign, imposing structure to a porous, adaptable, and resilient structure. The building morphology is designed to make the housing blocks more visually comfortable and not impose upon their context. While we designed the double rooftop structure to protect from the sun, we also saw the potential of shared spaces, sheltered from the rain. Roofs are often underused, but by providing covered areas, we aim to create a common space for the residents while reducing thermal heat gain. The green and blue infrastructure on the roof has the potential to collect rainwater for recycling and growing food. For the facade, we have to promote ventilation because it's a humid climate, while also providing protection against mosquitoes and excessive sunlight. We propose a horizontal louver system designed for the sun path per building. This allows air to freely pass through, while the integrated net will not allow mosquitoes to go through. The use of reflective materials and colors will also assist in reducing the heat gain. The idea with the balconies is to reduce the cross-section of the building, which helps in increasing the natural ventilation. So we propose circulation corridors on the sides of the blocks instead of in the center. Another option could be to have voids or punctures in the building facade. Both these options assist in natural ventilation. Another important part of the building which should undergo a complete redesign is the building's entrance. According to our projections, parts of Rio de Janeiro have a high probability of being flooded due to climate change. Therefore, we believe that the building's morphology should reflect the natural challenges and adapt to them. Raising the first floor with pillars will prevent the lower apartments from being consumed by water in case of a flood, and simultaneously provide a useful shared space, sheltered from the elements during normal times. Underused public areas are a common problem in post-war mass housing. An environmentally conscious approach would be to utilize this emptiness in urban fabric and create public green spaces, serving as environmental linkages. Another vital detail to add to the neighborhood's public spaces is our flood defense systems, so-called urban sponges, which will be strategically placed around the building away from circulation and occupied zones.
In this scale, we recommend to focus on visual comfortable proportions. Building blocks less than 10 stories. Safe distance between blocks in range 25-90 meters, optimal distance to see face of people or just a body. A rain block on sunshine and prevailing breezes. Make more shadow zones with gazelles and trees. Use reflective materials for sidewalks and facade. Also, developing a central cooling system for the district helps to save energy for local cooling and use native plants for rain gardens where collective rainwater. Our solutions influence on ecology, society, and economy spheres and have different impacts for householders and renters, developers, and government. Our solution help to improve the mental health of the residents, save energy resources, and develop a green economy. Multi-solution focused on social cohesion, indoor and outdoor space of blocks, functional diversity, improvements in cooling systems, and energy balance. It is our connective conceptual vision about future block in the tropical city zone. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you, Du, for this very short and inspiring presentation. I had the honor to be your tutor in this workshop, together with my dear colleague from Isocarp Experts Network, Elias Abumrad. And I hope that this solution will generate some questions in the question and answers section after these presentations. There are so many details that we can speak about how to adapt these massive blocks to the local climate challenges. I think we can now move to the next climate zone, the temperate climate zone, for which we have chosen the city of Berlin in Germany. And I would like to invite the representative of that group to share with us their designs and ideas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Liliana Nadia, and I will be presenting on behalf of my team. So during the workshop, we got assigned to think about the threats and challenges of the mass housing in the temperate zone of Berlin. The city of Berlin was divided politically and ideologically for almost 40 years, and this can be witnessed in the present residential building throughout the city. The Berlin climate is actually the Berlin climate is characterized with a warm summer and humid continental climate, while it is predicted that in the 2071 it will be a humid subtropical climate. Our task was to rethink the threats and opportunities that mass housing is expected to face, but also while studying this and while brainstorming on the climatic situation and the planning for mass housing, we propose some general design principles and policy implementation that try to give answer for the climate changes. In a more schematic and simplified idea, our design concept is that the first figure is the vertical architecture element that translates into the vertical agriculture, while the second is the horizontal circulation, which is allowed through the balcony diagrams, and this combined version staggers the vertical elements that are based on the grid that goes both ways. So basically, our building and the proposal is that the facade in itself or the building, it will be offered a dynamic and biodiverse grid that will adapt a lot of plantation, which we'll explain later in the overview of the architectonic elements. We focused on these architectonic elements in the facade, rooftop, balcony, and the public space on each one. And while overgoing with the theme, we focused that the facade, which is here a schematic way, the challenges is that the city of Berlin is categorized like many other cities with urban heat island. So our solution is that the rooftop in itself is the implementation of the green roofs, which has ecological, atmospheric, and social benefits, from providing a refuge for local migratory patterns for birds to allowing residents to grow and cultivate their own produce. Green roofs are also a strategy that assists in the overall network of cities. Our second element is the facade. So in the facade, the balconies which are surrounding the buildings push the perceivable facade outside. The second skin is made out of the greenery and wooden shavings, which prevent the summer overheating and let the sunlight through the winter. Windows are extended to let the wind and light through. Balconies maximize the outdoor spaces in our design, which are available to each flat and also provide access to unfiltered sunlight. The idea of balconies on its own is that the layout of the building itself, it will be a flexible housing, and also the balconies can be extended and can be kind of turned into a more private public space. So the last but not least is the public space, which is a interweaving of the exterior grounds of the residential buildings with the urban fabric of the city, and that creates areas for people in the community to interact with each other. The maximization of this space between the buildings can be used to create courtyards with vegetation pockets with native plants and also non-native plants that can be adapted and adequate for the climatic changes. Walking paths and bike lanes provide residents with more designated space to practice physical activities. Here it is an overview of our combined principles, and in this diagram we focused on the three elements or the three pillars, which is the infrastructure, the policy reform, and the design solution, with both of representing also the scale of intervention. The design solutions also should cover for when interacting this, exploring this workshop, it is that these solutions give an overview in terms of design. The proposed design guidelines which we propose and that are related to the architectural transformation, we must offer housing for all, And also, we should reduce inequalities on the basis of race, gender identity, and also advocating for inclusivity for residents. We should offer access to social transit, green infrastructure, and we should increase walkability. The idea is to design the 15-minute city. As architects and urban planners, we should be able to offer an adaptable architecture. So basically to design a plan that bridges current climate change challenges with a projected state. We should also take into consideration that the building that we design today should be resilient in the extreme conditions. And that can be also, the solution can be found in the local source materials. For example, the wood can be here in the area of the Brandenburg. The building and urban entities should be resilient in these conditions. And also we should incorporate the repellent plants, which here it is a projected ecologies. It's just a basic overview of how we see the implementation of the fauna in the building environment and in the building on its own. And I hope I covered everything for my group. This is a general visualization of what we managed to do while brainstorming. So I guess that would be all from Gertie. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilyana. This was really a very condensed presentation for a very complex challenge of a temperate climate zone. It's not easy to design for the temperate climate. And I would also like to thank the tutors of this group, Max Ivto and Elena Paco, for guiding you all guys towards these wonderful solutions. Let's see, how can we design and redesign for the hot and arid climates and for the city of Samarkand? Can the representative of that group share their screen?
Yeah, hello. One moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. We have something like 5 minutes per presentation, so let's try to be brief.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Екатерина Korchagina, and I want to present you our project, short project, which was done in this workshop. We call it Cooling Shelter, and now I will explain why. So our zone is located, our site is located in the arid zone. It is characterized by a lack of available water, by a very dry and hot climate. But in the near future, it will become even more hot. As you see on this graph, we have a lot of precipitation during only a short period, and then we have a period of drought here. And the temperature is pretty high, but if you will see the prediction, the precipitation will become lower, but we will still have a very short time of it, and the temperature will increase drastically. So it means that water becomes the most valuable source in this area. And that is why our concept is based on three main aspects. The first one is local aspects that was missed during this mass housing during Soviet time. And we based our concept on this Mahala idea. It's a local neighborhoods, and this feature, they have a feature that they use the space between these houses as a common areas. So we wanted to introduce it into our concept. The second thing is natural cooling. So we use all possibilities to cool the air inside the building. And the first one, this is like the most important part, is water harvesting. So we use all possible solutions for water harvesting. And the solution for this is, like in general, water harvesting double facade with common space, which it creates in between two facades. Oh, sorry. So this is basically how our proposal looks like. The main parts are the facade, which is a double facade structure. So we place a second screen on the existing building, which is covered with the plants and which collects water from the rainwater. And it also works as an insulation for the existing building. The second part is the rooftop. So we place these canopies, which also collects water from the rain. And also we organize public spaces which serve as a public garden for the locals. And also we put this wind towers, which were used during ancient times to catch the cool air, cool wind, and use it for the for cooling the space inside the building. We suggest to integrate balconies into the double facade, and for the entries, we propose this open gallery, which is also a very local thing. This canopies with the grapes on it. This is like a very local thing for Samarkand. And for public space, we've seen that during this flood period, there is a real problem of flooding. So for this period, we want to use public spaces as this sponge to absorb the water, to retain this water during the flood. And also we create canopies to collect the clean water and save it in the tanks underground. So here we can see closer the solutions with wind towers, canopies, and gardens on the roof. This is the part of the facade. Which contains the screen with plants which collects water. And also we propose to cut out these patios from the existing volume to create spaces for social gathering for the neighbors, which is also like a part of local culture. Yeah, and this is how this system of swales could work. So even these public spaces, they serve as places for water retention. And also we understand that not only design could be a solution, but also regulations and spatial policy. For example, we propose to make an evaluation tool to increase green infrastructure that will propose the amount of greenery that should be implemented in the area, and also organize some community buildings ideas like climate change education, like these competitions, like workshops that we have, for example. This is basically the systems which are integrated into our design. You see the wind tower, which catches the airflow, and it could be cooled by the sprinklers with water, and then it goes inside the building. The second part is water harvesting system, and the third part is the screen which protects our building from the sun heat. So as you see, our main focus is social function. So we want to increase the social gathering and local traditions in our design. And this is basically how it would look like. Thank you.
Now this looks very, very professional. Really, you covered all the topics to understand how this arid climate affects these big buildings and how it can be adapted to it. Thank you so much, and also thanks a lot to your tutors, Nabi Agzamov and Devyani Agrawal. I hope you had a great time working together. They're great people, so I hope you all enjoyed. Let's go to the final climate zone, the most drastic one, the cold climate zone of the city of Yakutsk. And let's hear about some solutions for that particular climate.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. Please go ahead, Valeria.
Okay, I would like to represent you idea of Yakutsk climate. Sorry. Okay, here right now we have a very bad climate condition because it's really hot during the almost all the year, and it became to be a bit hotter because of the climate change, but it will bring us not just good consequences, not just benefit from it. As we can see, temperature will become higher. We will have a bit more sunny day, but as well, we have a permafrost there, and actually all the buildings have a special design because all of them stay in the pillar. And when permafrost is melting, what we have currently in the Yakutsk building is destroyed, and it's the main problem that we should decide. Water overflow work for this as well, but we have some good benefits from climate changes. We'll have a bit more sunny day and a bit more sunny. And our main idea is to redistribute the density of the building, and by this improve housing without demolishing them. And we would like to reduce the load reduce the load and collect the water. What as well will work for the permafrost better. So our idea, the whole concept is difficult to divide to this 5 separate stages because, for example, balcony that we make bigger and make them more function becomes a big part of managing the facade, which we will insulate, and the entry that we will make more adapted for the new requirement, and for this climate will become the part of the whole public space that we will have around our courtyard. The rooftop, we wanted it not as a public space, but as a technical level of our building because of this very bad climate condition, and we propose for it to put their solar panel because, as I told, Yakutsk has really a lot of sunny hours, and we could use it because it will become just more, and we will collect the water and use it later at our greenhouses, and as well it will help us to prevent permafrost melting because water work as a blanket there and heat the ground. The next one work with a facade, and we will work in a different way with a different facade because at the facade at the north we need to insulate them because insulation layers and materials are really in a bad condition right now, and we would like to make more soft facade. That's why we will demolish part of the building, so all the people can have a soft facade, and they could use the opportunity of it. That's why we will develop this winter garden, and it will both works to adapt the flats to the new requirement of residents, to make them bigger, and it will make them more self-sufficient by urban gardening, by urban farming. We will make the new entry, and we have to approach one of them when we will destroy part of the building. We will put there one big new space for the interaction for the residents, where they can do a lot of different activities which can change through the years, through the decades. And when we're not demolishing nothing, we will just add a new entry that will be adapted for the disability, for the people with disabilities, because actually this pillar is really high. They around at 1.5 meters, and people just don't get to the entry, people with disabilities. And it will become to be a part of system of public space that will be built to the old houses, and that will be built SMU houses, but from the panels at the same from the same houses, and it will make courtyard in a more human scale. We will make this system more flexible, more adaptive for the changes. And it's the summary of all our solution. As you can see, we will improve circulation. We will collect and reuse the water. We will reduce the wind that we have here, because we will close the courtyard. We will have more sunlight at our courtyard, because we will make the height of the building low. And finally, we will have public space, common space that will work all year around with this climate. What's very important, and we will have vegetation with the access as well all year round. We concentrate mainly in the improving of balance of the house, because of the permanent of the permafrost melting, and it's increasing the social function and functional diversity. But it was difficult to make a relative cost of this adoption, because we will have new materials, and actually it's really difficult to bring them there to Yakutsk, and that's why the sustainability is not solved well. And actually, this building is under threat of destroying totally. That's why the volume of intervention to the building is high, and that's why cost will be high as well for this. For all of this decision, and it's how courtyard will looks after this. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much. I really like this last visualization. It shows a lot of people using this space, and it's very typical for this group that you actually kind of increased the density of the space by building new blocks next to it to keep it kind of, a little warm block altogether. Big thanks to you, Valeria, and also thanks to Ekaterina Maleva and Chris Steenhuis as the tutors of this group. I would like to open the floor for questions and remarks from our speakers and guests. We don't have much time for the remarks, but I think it's quite beneficial to hear some feedback about this very good thought through designs that we have seen in all the 4 groups. I was wondering, Michaela, Mrs. Kauer, if you would be maybe interested in giving some comments from your side.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I think these are remarkable projects, and congrats to all of you who have done that. I mean, it's really great, and I especially like the approach of doing this, along the climate zones. So I was always thinking in my mind, have I ever been in such places? And I just found 2. I have been to Irkutsk once, And clearly, I have been to places in Europe, but Brazil is still on my list to go. So yeah, you inspired me. That's
Great.
not only for our future journeys, but also because I think that what you did is really, really taking elements and reorganizing them along the needs of the people there and of the effective, circumstances. And I think that this is something we will have to think about in the future for a lot of things, because we have seen fires, destroying habitat. We have seen floods destroying habitat.
Yes.
We have seen earthquakes destroying habitats. So all these climate-related issues, they're going to have even a stronger component, I think, in the future. And that's why your work has been so valid. Now, I have a question for, I would say, all of the groups. And that's because feminism is in my DNA.
Yes.
So I would like the groups maybe to reflect a little bit on the gender dimension of their projects, because that's also part of the cultural adequacy of things a lot. When we talk about housing, we very often also talk about cultural adequacy. But when we talk about that and about gender equality, we also need to see, are these ideas also able to empower women to participate more in public life, in the public spheres, not only in the virtual ones, but also in the physical ones? Or are they reinforcing old patterns of old, traditional role models? So I would like to hear about that, if I have an answer for free.
Well, that's a very peculiar question that you're asking, but also a very relevant one, especially after the presentations that we have heard in the first part and the presentation.
If I can say a word, Milena and Michaela,
talking about
I would just like to say that among the 40 participants that we had, and especially in our group at the temperate zone, we had a great majority of women participating. And so I think at least my first answer, but then I will give the floor to the other, is that women seem to be more motivated to renovate mass housing units than men, as far as I know.
Shall we give the voice to the women then, Max? Maybe Rowena can say something if she's with us as a tutor from your group. What is her opinion on this?
So if Rowena is not here, I can talk. I was from group. One of our design guidelines, actually, the first one, is that our idea is to offer housing for all. So it is reducing inequalities on the basis of race, gender, and identity. And this is our main goal. And then advocating for residents, and also including making this participatory design by including and having a dialogue of different stakeholders and community. So this is something that we oversaw on our workshop during with Max and Rowena. And also we had one minority, just one man. So it was quite the power there, I would say.
Okay, great. I mean, what I'm always curious about this adaptation issues and gender issues is there are probably completely different standards for men bodies and female bodies, and how does that reflect in housing renovation and housing needs? Can we have some feedback on that from the cold climate? Actually, I'm quite curious about. Did you take some aspects from this gender inclusion in the cold climate group? Valeria, can you maybe reflect on that a little bit?
Yes, I suppose that when we have this common space where people can interact with each other, where they can see how other people live or talk with each other, it's actually it makes this problem a bit more, because people understand how other people live, what happens with them. They know each other, and they will see if something happens with their neighbor. They care about them, and I think that it makes people care about them in neighborhood, in the flat more.
Yeah. Thanks a lot for this reflection. I think what it boils down, and also from the experiences that we have in the group dealing with tropical climate, is the issue of safety and security in these massive blocks, and perceived safety and security in these massive blocks is very important when we are talking about gender balancing or gender issues in planning, because as we know, there is this a lot of let's say feelings of insecurity in public space experienced by women in cities. And I think that's something that should be taken into account when we are talking about renovation of the mass housing blocks. I would like to give the final word actually to Ekaterina Maleva, and to speak about to try to kind of summarize the results of this workshop and the conference, and also talk a little bit about other things that we have jointly prepared with Strelka, such a collective manifesto. So please, Ekaterina, can you take the floor and tell us something more about this?
Thank you, Milena. I would like to thank everyone who joined us during those 3 days. I'm really impressed of the event, because I didn't expect it to be so, let's say, high level. And I really enjoyed the conference that we had today, because I really got a lot of information for my personal curiosity, I would say. I would like to say that this is just a first step in our common initiative together with the Isocarp Institute to promote this topic of mass housing renovation, which I would say is somehow neglected at the moment, yes, especially in our country. And that's why we are going to launch to develop further the webpage that you all have seen while registering to the event, and to make a database of all the information that we have received during this event there, and also to collect further solutions and initiatives on the topic, so that every person interested in the topic could have a look and maybe exchange. And also the results of the outputs and outcomes of this conference are going to build a manifesto on the mass housing renovation that we are going to publish on the webpage. And of course, we will make a mailing, an email to each of the participants and speakers and the audience, to inform on the main conclusions that we have made. And this manifesto and the results of the workshop will be presented on at several other events. The first of it is COP26, which will take place in November, and the presentation at the moment is scheduled to the 20th of November, so everyone is welcome to have a look on it. Thank you once again to everyone, to our dear partners from Isocarp Institute. We have worked on this event for such a long time.
Thank you, Ekaterina. It was a pleasure working and developing on this format. It really took some months to develop, but the results are really very great.
Thank you.
I would like to give final thanks to our two other partners without whom it would not have been possible. And I mean the World Urban Campaign, because this was a Urban Thinkers Campus hosted by the World Urban Campaign, and also the European Union through the delegation of the European Union in the Russian Federation that has sponsored and made this possible. Thanks a lot. And so meet you at the COP26 on November the 10th, and we hope that further events will be announced on the webpage. Take care.
Thank you so much. Take care, and watch and rewatch the YouTube channel again. Thank you so much.
Congratulations.